That evening, my mother slid a thick tuition check across the oak dining table to my younger sister, then turned to me with a calmness so cold, it almost stopped my breathing. "You want to go to college? Fine. Find a way to pay for it yourself." I still remember the sound of my knife and fork freezing in my hands. Same kitchen, same dinner, same parents sitting in front of us. Yet somehow Vanessa and I had not been born into the same family. For her, the future was something rolled out like a red carpet. For me, the future was a door slammed shut, the moment I placed my hand on the knob. 9 years later, I stood at the back of Vanessa's wedding hall, watching crystal chandeliers spill light over the pure white wedding gown my parents had paid for. The same people who once said they could not help me with even part of my tuition. The same people who had called abandonment a lesson in independence. If you have ever felt like an outsider in your own family, comment one. And if this story touches you, do not forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more stories like this. My mother stood near the head table, holding a glass of champagne, her smile polished and glossy like varnish. She looked around the room filled with 200 guests, then tilted her head toward my father and said softly enough to pretend it was private, but clearly enough for me to hear. "Why do I feel like something is missing today?" My father did not have time to answer. The groom turned around. Daniel Hart, the man Vanessa was about to marry, looked straight at me. The color drained from his face little by little, as if he had just spotted a massive flaw in the perfect painting of his life. He looked at me, then at Vanessa, then back at me again. Then he said only one word. A single word that made the orchestra fall silent, made Vanessa drop her wine glass, and left my mother frozen in the middle of the room she thought she had under control. But to understand why that one word could shatter a wedding, a lie that had lasted 9 years, and the polished mask of my entire family, I have to go back to the beginning. Back to the night I realized I was not really their daughter. I was only the leftover piece in the story they wanted to tell. I grew up in a white house in the suburbs of West Hartford, Connecticut, where the fence was always repainted before it could peel, the lawn was always mowed by my father on Saturday mornings, and the living room always smelled like vanilla, candles whenever guests came over. From the outside, the Whitmore family looked like the kind of family people wanted to see on a Christmas card. A father who was a lawyer. A mother who was elegant and knew how to choose tablecloths for every season. 2 daughters, one blonde and one brunette, standing side by side in carefully framed photographs. But inside that house, love was not divided equally. It was sorted into categories. Vanessa was an investment. I was an expense to be reduced. My mother, Margaret Whitmore, never said those words out loud, but every action of hers wrote them on the walls. Vanessa had piano lessons from the age of 6. I was given an old flute from a cousin and told I should be grateful. Vanessa had a new dress for every school dance. I stood in front of my closet, pulling loose threads back into an old dress, while my mother said, "What you're wearing is fine. Stop asking for too much." Once during a backyard barbecue, my mother linked her arm through Vanessa's and introduced her to the neighbors with a glowing voice. "This is Vanessa. She has such a bright future." Then she turned to me and her smile dimmed as if someone had lowered the lights. "And this is Clara." That was all. Nothing more. No pride. No expectation. Not one sentence to prove that I was her daughter too. The refrigerator in the kitchen was the clearest place to see who was loved. Vanessa's cheerleading photos. Vanessa's certificates. Vanessa's congratulatory notes from teachers. Even a pressed flower from one of her school dances was taped right in the center. In 10th grade, I received an honor certificate in biology. I quietly placed it on the refrigerator, holding the top corner with a blue magnet, then stood there looking at it for a long time. I had thought this time my mother would notice. That afternoon when I came home, the certificate was gone. I searched the trash can, the kitchen drawers, and even under the stack of junk mail. Finally, my mother sat at the dining table, not looking up from her magazine, and said, "The fridge was getting too cluttered." I cleared some things off. Cleared some things off. Those words followed me for years. Because in that house, everything that belonged to Vanessa was a memory, while everything that belonged to me was just clutter. My father, Thomas, was not like my mother. He was not cruel. He did not mock me, and he did not put me down in front of other people. But he had a kind of absence that hurt even more. He saw everything. He saw me being pushed out of photos, interrupted at dinner, and turned by my mother into an example of being stubborn. But he always stayed silent. Sometimes when my mother was not nearby, my father would put his hand on my shoulder and say, very softly, "I'm proud of you, Clara." I used to live on those words, like a child picking up crumbs along a road. But the older I grew, the more I understood that the saddest thing was not that my father was not proud of me. It was that he only dared to be proud when no one was watching. I once believed everything would change when I got accepted into college. I thought that if my achievements were clear enough, my mother would no longer have a reason to deny me. I prepared a blue folder with my acceptance letter, my scholarship confirmation, my estimated expenses, and my part-time work plan inside. That evening, my mother made lemon-roasted chicken, Vanessa's favorite dish. My father sat at the head of the table, cutting his meat very slowly. Vanessa sat across from me, her phone resting near the edge of her plate. I waited until my mother had finished her second glass of wine before placing the folder on the table. "I got accepted into UConn," I said. "The scholarship covers half. I only need you and Dad to help with the rest. I'll work part-time." My mother did not open the folder. She only looked at it as if it were a bill sent to the wrong address. "Clara, we have already discussed this." "We have never discussed it," I replied softly. "Not even once." She exhaled and slowly folded her napkin. "You need to learn independence. In the real world, no one rolls out a carpet for you." I looked at Vanessa. In front of her was the tuition check. My parents had already prepared for Syracuse. Then why doesn't Vanessa need to learn that lesson? The air around the dinner table froze. Vanessa looked up from her phone, but she said nothing. My father kept his eyes on his plate, the knife in his hand suspended over the meat. My mother smiled, the kind of smile that made other people feel small. "Your sister's situation is different. Vanessa has potential that needs to be nurtured. And you, Clara, you are stronger. You will figure it out." Stronger. I hated that word. Because in my mother's mouth, strong was not a compliment. It was an excuse to take everything away from me and still believe she was right. I turned to my father. I did not need him to start a fight. I only needed him to say one sentence. "Margaret Clara is our daughter too." But my father stayed silent. His silence was not loud, but it cut through me deeper than anything my mother had ever said. "So that's it?" I asked. My mother lifted her water glass. "If you truly want to study, you will find a way. Strong people always do." I gathered my papers. The pages trembled in my hands, but I did not cry. I did not want to give my mother more proof that I was weak. After dinner, my father stopped me in the hallway. For 1 second, I thought he was finally going to choose me. He placed his hand on my arm, his eyes looking away. "Your mother has her reasons," he said. "Give things more time." Then he returned to the living room where his peace was always bought with my silence. That night, I sat on the floor of my bedroom, staring at the folder beside my old suitcase. Near dawn, I understood something with a cold clarity. If I stayed in that house, I would not only lose college, I would lose myself. I did not sleep that night. My room was completely dark with only a thin strip of streetlight cutting through the curtains and lying across the floor like a crack. I sat beside my old suitcase, folding each item into it with a strange calmness. 2 pairs of jeans. 3 sweaters. A pair of sneakers with worn-out soles. My college folder. And the biology certificate I later found in an old cardboard box under my bed, slightly wrinkled, but still carrying my name right in the center. I did not leave a letter. Not because I wanted them to worry, but because I had spent my entire life explaining myself, explaining that I worked hard too, explaining that I hurt too, explaining that if a child had to beg her parents to see her, then that house had stopped being a home a long time ago. Near 5 in the morning, I dragged my suitcase down the stairs. Each wooden step let out a small creak, making my heart tighten. I was afraid my mother would wake up. I was afraid my father would open his bedroom door. But more than anything, I was afraid that if someone asked me where I was going, I would grow weak and stay. The kitchen was cold and clean in a way that felt almost heartless. My mother's coffee machine sat silently on the stone counter, waiting until 6:15 to begin another perfect day. I placed my house key beside it. No note. No final sentence. Just a small piece of metal returned to a place that had never truly held me. When I opened the garage door, the yellow light suddenly came on. My father was sitting inside the gray Buick, both hands resting on the steering wheel, the engine turned off. He was wearing the shirt from the night before the collar, wrinkled his eyes red as if he had been sitting there for a very long time. I froze in the doorway, my hand still gripping the suitcase handle. He looked at me through the windshield. I looked back. In that moment, I waited. I waited for him to open the car door. I waited for him to say my name. I waited for one simple sentence. Clara, though not go alone. I will help you. But he did nothing. Those 3 seconds lasted longer than my entire childhood. Then I turned, pulled my suitcase out of the garage, and walked down the sidewalk, still wet with morning dew. Behind me there was no sound of a car door opening, no footsteps chasing after me. Only the dry, steady sound of my suitcase wheels rolling over the pavement, like a heartbeat trying not to break. The bus stop on Farmington Avenue was empty. I sat beneath the plastic shelter, both hands gripping the strap of my bag, watching the sun rise behind the houses I had once believed I belonged to. When the bus arrived, I stepped on without looking back, because if I turned around even once, I was afraid I would see my father still sitting there and forgive him too soon. My dorm room had a narrow bed, a metal desk, and a window that would not close properly. I had forgotten to bring a blanket. On the first night, I slept in my coat, curled up against the cold, listening to the wind whistle through the crack in the window. I thought that was the hardest part. I was wrong. During my first week in college, I learned that freedom was nothing like I had imagined. It had no background music, no beautiful lighting, and none of that powerful feeling people saw in movies when they were sad. My freedom was a cold room, an empty stomach, and a schedule so packed that I had to write every hour of sleep into my planner like a luxury appointment. I took a dishwashing job at a small Italian restaurant near the town center. The evening shift began when my roommate was getting ready to go to the movies and ended when the streets were so empty that the garbage truck sounded like metal scraping against the night. I stood in the sweltering kitchen, both hands soaked in soapy water, my back aching my shirt, carrying the smell of fried oil so deeply that no matter how long I showered, I could still feel it clinging to my skin. After that, I took a night shift at a gas station on the roadside. From midnight until morning, I sold cold coffee, cigarettes, dry donuts, and listened to strangers tell me fragments of their lives before disappearing back into the dark. One night, a drunk man slammed his hand on the counter because his card had been declined. I stood still, smiled, and apologized, even though I only had a few loose bills left in my own pocket. On weekends, I cleaned dormitory floors. I scrubbed the toilets of students whose parents sent them monthly food. Money picked up energy drink cans from under beds and emptied trash bins in rooms, still warm with the smell of delivered food. No one knew I was a student there, too. Or if they knew, they pretended not to see it. Some mornings I walked past classmates while pushing a cleaning cart. They greeted me with awkward smiles, then quickly looked away. I slept in fragments. 40 minutes on a library chair. An hour and a half on the laundry room floor. Once I woke up in chemistry class with my pen still in my hand, the notebook page in front of me marked only by one long streak of ink, like a heartbeat that had suddenly faltered. My grade point average began to slip. My scholarship, the only thing keeping me in school, became a rope hanging over my head. If I fell even a little further, I would lose everything. One evening in the restaurant kitchen, a pot of boiling water spilled over my left hand. 3 fingers burned fiercely, the skin turning red before blistering. The manager asked if I needed to go home. I looked at the clock, thought about rent, thought about the tuition I still owed, and shook my head. I wrapped my hand with gauze from the old first aid kit and kept working until the end of my shift. The next morning I still went to class. Not because I was brave, but because I had no one to fall into. I met Professor Alan Mercer on a Tuesday afternoon, with my left hand still wrapped in gauze and my eyes burning from lack of sleep. He taught Introduction to Health Science. He had gray hair, always wore a bow tie, and looked at students as if each one of them were a story he had not finished reading. That day I fell asleep in the middle of class. Not just lowering my head and waking up again, but truly disappearing for a few seconds. When I opened my eyes, the entire room had gone silent, and he was standing in front of my desk. I prepared to apologize. I prepared for a warning. I prepared to be reminded that college was not meant for people without discipline. But he only looked at my hand. "Could you stay for a moment after class, Clara?" When the room slowly emptied, Professor Mercer pulled out a chair, sat across from me, and spoke very softly. "You are exhausted." "That is not a question." I smiled by reflex, like someone used to covering the cracks. "I'm fine." "No," he said. "You are living as if your body can postpone maintenance forever." That sentence made me go silent. For months, no one had spoken to me like I was a person. They only saw a dishwasher, a night shift cashier, a weekend floor cleaner, a student who kept falling asleep in class. Professor Mercer was the first person who saw through all those roles. I told him part of it. Just enough for him to understand that I was not lazy, not irresponsible, only too poor to rest. He listened to everything without interrupting. Then he took out a file about an internal research grant. "You are smarter than the life you are allowing yourself to live," he said. "Do not let poverty burn down your future before you even get to step into it." 2 weeks later, I had a research assistant position in his lab. The money was not much, but it was enough for me to quit the night shift at the gas station. The first night, I did not have to stand behind a counter. Until morning, I returned to my dorm at 10 o'clock and cried. Not because I was sad, because for the first time my body understood that it was allowed to sleep. That same semester, I met Nora Ellis. She sat beside me in biology class, her hair tied up in a hurry with shadows under her eyes, so deep it felt like I was looking into a mirror. On the first day, she looked at me and said, "You look the way I feel." I laughed. "Is that a compliment?" "It's recognition," Nora replied. "It means you're still showing up." Nora became the first person to hear my whole story. One night, we sat on the library steps eating sandwiches bought from the gas station, and I told her about Vanessa's check, the key beside the coffee machine, and my father sitting in the car without stepping out. Nora did not try to heal me with a few pretty sentences. She only said, "Clara, you don't owe them a beautiful ending. You only owe yourself a real life. If you have ever been trusted by a stranger more than by your own family, comment, I understand." And subscribe to the channel if you want to keep walking with me toward the moment when the truth finally comes to light. I did not know it then, but Nora's sentence and the chance in the lab kept me there, not only in school but in my own life. After I got the research assistant position, my life did not immediately become easy. It only stopped feeling like a room on fire. I still worked at the restaurant, still counted every dollar before buying food, and still did my laundry when almost no one else in the dorm was awake. But on the nights when I no longer had to stand at the gas station until morning, I began to have a luxury I had never dared to imagine before. Time to think. Professor Mercer assigned me to help with a small project about patient data management in community clinics. At first, I only entered data-checked system errors and read reports about electronic medical records. But the more I read, the more I noticed something strange. Small clinics, the places that served elderly patients, immigrants, and people without good insurance, often had to use complicated and expensive software. Doctors spent hours searching for information. Nurses wrote notes on paper and entered them again after their shifts. I did not know much about business back then. I only knew what it felt like to be forgotten by a system. Maybe that was why I looked at those small clinics with a very personal kind of empathy. They were not lacking ability. They were only lacking a tool built for people like them. I began to write. At first it was notes in the margins of documents. Then it became short analyses I sent to Professor Mercer. Then one night after my dishwashing shift, I sat in the employee break room surrounded by the smell of cleaning fluid and damp towels, opened my old laptop and wrote for almost 4 hours. The first 12 pages were born that way. No elegance. No applause. Only a 20-year-old girl with faint burn scars, still on 3 fingers, sitting beneath a flickering fluorescent light, trying to explain why small clinics deserved a better system. The next morning, I sent the draft to Professor Mercer. That afternoon, he called me into his office and placed the printed pages on his desk. "Clara," he said, "this is not just a research paper. This could become a real product." I looked at him, not understanding it right away. A real product sounded like something that belonged to people with investing parents' connections and private offices. Not me. But Professor Mercer did not laugh. He pushed the pages back toward me. "Do not be too quick to believe what your family made you think about your own limits." That night, I carried the 12 pages back to my room. Outside the window, cold wind slipped through the familiar crack. For the first time in a very long time, the room no longer felt like the place where I had been abandoned. It felt like the beginning. After graduation, I had no family standing in the audience, no bouquet of flowers, and no celebratory dinner waiting for me. Nora was the only person who shouted my name when I walked across the stage to receive my diploma. She held up a handmade sign, the letters crooked and uneven, but to me it shone brighter than every round of applause that day. We celebrated at a roadside diner, shared a plate of cheese fries, and called it a graduation party. I was not as sad as I thought I would be. Maybe because I had stopped expecting the empty seats in my life to suddenly be filled. A month later, I took a job at a small health technology company in Hartford. The office was cramped, the coffee was bitter, and the printer jammed constantly, but I loved every day there. I wrote code, fixed system errors, and learned how to talk to doctors and nurses. I realized that technology was not only cold lines of code. If done right, it could help keep a patient's records from getting lost and help a small clinic avoid being swallowed by costs. Every night I returned to my tiny rented apartment, opened my laptop, and kept developing the idea that had started from those 12 research pages years earlier. I named it CareBridge Systems. A simple, affordable platform for small clinics that had been forgotten by the big software companies. In the first year, I had 2 clients, a folding table for a desk, and a chair that creaked every time I leaned back. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my father. And I did not tell Vanessa. But Vanessa's life still appeared in front of me even when I was not looking for it. Social media algorithms seemed to hate peace. They brought photos of my sister onto my screen at the moments when I was most exhausted. Vanessa in a silk dress in Florence. Vanessa with a glass of wine on a yacht. Vanessa standing beside my mother at a charity event with the caption below, "My daughter, a future healthcare executive." I looked at those photos while eating instant noodles beside my overheating laptop. I no longer felt the jealousy I had known when I was younger. What I felt was stranger, deeper. One person had been invested in to become a symbol. One person had been left behind and was forced to become real. I heard from a few relatives that Vanessa was doing very well in school, that she was about to earn her master's degree, that she would soon become a senior manager in a large clinic network. My mother told that story everywhere, as if announcing a rising stock. As for me, she said very little. If anyone asked, she only sighed and said Clara is still finding herself. I used to want to argue. I used to want to send them my company registration, my first contract, the first article that mentioned Carebridge. But then I closed my laptop. I did not need to step onto my mother's stage to prove that I existed. I was building a life that did not need her as an audience. I had thought distance would make my family forget how to pull me back into my old role. I was wrong. One autumn evening, just after Carebridge had signed its 5th clinic, my phone lit up with a Connecticut number. I stared at the digits for a long time. It was not my mother's number. It was not my father's. But something inside me still tightened, like a scar being touched. Clara Vanessa's voice came through softer than I remembered. It's me. I stood by the window of my apartment looking down at the rain-soaked street. I know. A brief silence followed. Then she spoke quickly as if she were afraid her courage would disappear if she paused. I need your help with something. Mom doesn't know I'm calling. I said nothing. I need $8,000. Just as a loan. I'll pay you back. I leaned against the wall. In my mind, I saw the tuition check my mother had once slid across the table to Vanessa. I saw the Audi with the red bow on social media. I saw the years when I slept in my coat because I did not even have a blanket. What for? It's complicated. Then I can't help you. Clara, please. You have money. That sentence made me laugh, but there was no joy in it. You have money. As if money had simply grown out of those nights when I washed dishes until my hands cracked. As if it had appeared after those mornings when I sat in class with a burn still aching on my skin. As if it had come from years when no one asked if I had enough to eat. No, I said. Vanessa was silent for a few seconds. Then her voice turned cold, becoming very much like our mother's. You're really going to do this to your own sister. I'm doing what you and Mom once told me I had to learn, I said. I'm letting you figure it out. She hung up. 30 minutes later, my mother's number appeared on my screen. I did not answer. She called again. Then again. Finally, a message came through. After everything this family has done for you, how dare you turn your back on your sister? I stared at those words, but anger did not come immediately. Only exhaustion. Some lies are repeated for so long that the people telling them begin to believe they are true. My mother had rewritten the past too many times. In her version, I was the daughter who left home out of pride. Vanessa was the good daughter who needed protection. And my mother was the wounded woman hurt by her oldest child. During the week that followed, relatives started calling. Aunt Helen said my mother cried every night. One cousin told me not to let money destroy family. I stopped explaining. I only answered with one word, clearer each time. No. For the first time, that word did not make me feel guilty. It made me feel alive. 2 years after that phone call, Carebridge Systems was no longer just an overheated laptop on a kitchen table. We had an office in Boston, our own engineering team, and clients across New England. I still drove my old Honda and still rented a small apartment, but for the first time I was no longer living with the feeling that tomorrow could slip out of my hands. One March morning, I flew to Chicago to speak at a health technology conference. When my presentation ended, a man in a gray suit approached me near the coffee station. "You're Clara Whitmore, right?" he asked. "I'm Daniel Hart, Chief Financial Officer of Lakeview Medical Partners." His handshake was firm, his gaze direct. He said Lakeview was expanding into more locations and needed a better system for managing medical records and staff credentials. We exchanged business cards. On the flight back to Boston, I wrote in my notebook, "Daniel Hart, Lakeview, April meeting." That was all. A major client. I did not know that name was about to collide with my past. 6 months later, the contract with Lakeview was nearly complete. It was the largest deal Carebridge had ever had. One part of the system was a staff credential verification module. To build it properly, we needed Lakeview's current employee list, including degrees, job titles, and licenses. It was a normal process. Data went in the system, checked it, and the results came back. Then one Tuesday afternoon, when I had just returned home from the office, there was a cream-colored envelope on the floor outside my apartment door. The paper was thick with gold-pressed edges and embossed lettering so carefully made that I could tell at first glance it did not belong to my everyday life. I opened it in the kitchen. The Whitmore and Hart families cordially invite you to the wedding of Vanessa Whitmore and Daniel Hart. I read the groom's name twice. Daniel Hart. The same man preparing to sign the biggest contract my company had ever seen. The same man Vanessa was about to marry. Behind the invitation was a piece of paper torn from a notebook. The handwriting was shaky, slightly slanted, pressed deep into the page. Please come, my daughter. Dodge. Not my mother. Not Vanessa. My father. I stood beside the kitchen counter for a long time. 9 years of silence did not disappear because of 3 words. But some wounds, even after they have scabbed over, still ache when the person who hurt you finally dares to knock. That night, I called Nora. My sister is marrying my biggest client, I said. The line went quiet for a few seconds. Does he know you're her sister? No. He knows I'm the CEO of Carebridge. Not Clara, the girl hidden at the end of the Whitmore dinner table. What are you going to do? I looked at my father's note then, at the Lakeview contract on my screen. I'm going, I said. And in that exact moment, I understood that I was not only walking into a wedding, I was walking into the place where 2 lies were about to meet the truth. Rosewood Estate sat near the Connecticut shoreline. The wedding garden was covered in white flowers, string lights hung between old oak trees, and a string quartet played a melody so soft that the place looked as if it had never held a lie. I arrived with Nora at 4:40. I wore a simple dark blue dress. She walked beside me, quiet but steady, like a hand placed against my back. Because of her, I passed through the wedding arch without turning around. Less than 5 minutes later, Aunt Helen saw me. She was standing beside the champagne table, her lips pressed into a thin line. I didn't think you would come. I was invited. By whom? Does that matter? She turned away and whispered something to 2 women standing nearby. Both of them immediately looked at me. I knew that look. The look people gave someone who had already been convicted before getting the chance to introduce herself. Then my mother appeared. Margaret Whitmore crossed the lawn like a host stepping onto a stage. Champagne-colored dress, perfectly curled hair, and a smile so bright it looked false. When she saw me, that smile simply froze. She pulled me behind the white rose arch, her hand tightening around my elbow. What are you doing here? Attending my sister's wedding. You stopped being part of this family a long time ago. I looked at her hand. Whose choice was that, Mom? Her jaw tightened. Do not cause a scene today. I have no intention of causing one. She turned back toward the guests, her smile recovering in an instant. Clara decided to surprise us. How lovely. She did not hug me. She did not ask how I had been. She only tucked me into her performance like a stain that needed to be covered with a cloth. A little later, my father walked over. His suit was slightly too loose. His eyes were red. He said nothing. He only pulled me into his arms. My body stiffened because that embrace was 9 years late. But then I still placed my hand on his back. Hi, Dad, I said. He nodded. I could feel my mother's eyes on my back, sharp as needles. Vanessa appeared soon after wearing a wide, white wedding gown, her smile opening at the exact moment a guest looked over. She hugged me, the scent of expensive perfume settling over my collar. "You really came," she said. "I've missed you so much." Her embrace was light as paper. Enough for a photograph. Not enough for family. My mother seated Nora and me at the last table in the room, hidden behind a large column near the staff entrance. From there I could see the head table where Vanessa was being introduced as the successful daughter in healthcare. And when one relative asked what I did, my mother only gave a faint smile. "Clara, she's still finding her way." Nora held my hand under the tablecloth. I looked toward the stage where Daniel Hart was speaking with a few groomsmen. He had not seen me yet, but that was about to change. My mother's speech began after the main course. Margaret Whitmore held the microphone with both hands, her eyes already shining before she even spoke her first sentence. She talked about late-night school drop-offs and the difficult choices a family made when they always put their children's future first. I sat behind the large column, listening to every sentence fall like salt into an old wound. Vanessa is proof that when parents pour their hearts into investing in their child, beautiful things will bloom, my mother said. The whole room applauded. I did not. Nora gently squeezed my hand under the table, as if reminding me that I was still here even after my mother had turned me into a footnote. Then my mother looked toward me. "And of course," she said, "we love all our children. Today, our family is finally complete." A few people turned their heads. I kept my face still. Sometimes not reacting is the only way to avoid handing someone the knife they want to use. I planned to sit quietly until the reception ended. But at that exact moment, Daniel Hart walked toward my table with Greg Palmer, Lakeview's managing partner. Greg saw me first. He stopped in the middle of the aisle. Clara Whitmore." Daniel turned to him, then looked at me. His entire expression changed. "Wait," he said. "You're Clara Whitmore." I stood up. "Hello, Daniel." He looked at the place card on the table, then toward the stage where Vanessa was smiling. "I know you as Clara Reed from the company files." "Reed is the name I use professionally," I said. "Whitmore is my birth name." Greg laughed in surprise. "Daniel, she's the CEO of CareBridge Systems. The person we're about to sign with." The air around my table shifted. My mother hurried toward us. "Mrs. Whitmore," Daniel said. "Did you know who Clara was?" My mother smiled, but the smile was stretched tight like a string about to snap. "Of course. She's my daughter." "No," Daniel replied. "I mean, did you know? She was the founder of CareBridge. The company Lakeview is preparing to sign a $2.8 million contract with." My mother went still. Only for 1 second. But it was the second I had been waiting for across 9 years. The second when she could not find another version of the story fast enough. The second when she could not turn me into the lost daughter. Daniel stepped onto the nearby stage and took the microphone. I said quietly, "Daniel, don't. This is Vanessa's day." But he had already turned toward the guests. "Excuse me, everyone. I just discovered something very special. The CEO of CareBridge Systems, Lakeview's most important strategic technology partner, is here with us today. And she is Vanessa's sister." The entire room went silent. If you were Clara, would you quietly leave or stay to hear the truth speak for itself? Comment, stay or leave. And remember to subscribe to the channel, because what comes next is when the whole room truly falls silent. Daniel continued, his voice full of respect. "She built her company from nothing, wrote the first prototype herself, and brought it into more than 20 small clinics across New England. I admired her before I even knew we were about to become family." The applause began scattered at first, then growing louder. I stood at the back of the room in the place where my mother had tried to hide me, and for the first time in my life, the entire room turned to look at me, not with pity, but with respect. At the head table, Vanessa set down her wine glass. Her face had gone pale, because she understood that the light now shining on me would not stop there. After the applause for me, the room no longer felt like a wedding reception. The people who had once heard my mother say that Clara was still finding her way began looking from me to her then, from her to Vanessa. No one asked anything but their eyes did the asking for them. Vanessa stood beside the three-tiered wedding cake, holding her white bouquet, her smile frozen on her lips. My mother walked quickly toward Daniel, her voice still soft, though the sharp edge underneath had begun to show. Daniel, today is not the time to talk about business. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. This is no longer about business. I stepped closer. Daniel, don't do this here. He turned to me. Clara, I am about to marry a woman who used that resume to apply for a position in my system. If she lied, I need to know now. Vanessa hurried forward. Darling, we can talk in private. Daniel shook his head. I will ask only one question. The entire room went still. Even the string quartet stopped in the middle of a long note. Did you really graduate from the master's program in healthcare administration the way you wrote on your resume? Vanessa's lips parted. She looked at my mother. It was only a very quick glance, but it was enough for me to understand everything. All her life she had been taught by my mother how to smile before answering, how to turn the truth into something that could be bent. My mother immediately stepped in. Of course she graduated. Daniel, this question is insulting. Daniel did not look at her. He looked only at Vanessa. I am asking you. Vanessa swallowed. Her hand trembled so badly that the flowers in her bouquet shook. One bridesmaid stepped back. Someone placed a wine glass on the table, and the sound of glass touching wood rang out as clearly as a gavel. I studied there, Vanessa whispered. I did not ask if you studied there. I asked if you graduated. Tears began to smear her mascara. For a few seconds, I saw the girl who had once sat across from me at the dinner table silently watching as my mother refused to help me with tuition. That girl had grown up protected for too long until she believed that even lying was a privilege. Finally, Vanessa said one word. No. One very small word. But it made the entire wedding collapse. Daniel closed his eyes. When he opened them, his face was pale. So the degree hanging in your office is fake. Vanessa broke down crying. I was going to tell you. When his voice cracked, after the wedding, after I put you in a management position, my mother nearly lunged forward. Enough. She only wanted a chance. Daniel turned to her. A chance should not be built on deception. Vanessa sank to the floor. Her white wedding gown spread around her like a cloud falling to the ground. There was no perfect daughter anymore. No future healthcare executive. Only a woman being suffocated by her own mask. Then Daniel looked toward me. Clara, he said, his voice rough, you are the only honest person in this family. No one applauded. My father stood near the edge of the stage, one hand gripping the back of a chair, tears running down his face without him wiping them away. My mother turned to me, her face twisted with anger. Are you satisfied now? You destroyed your sister's life. I answered very softly, but loud enough for the people nearby to hear. No, Mom. Vanessa destroyed her own life with a lie. And you destroyed this family by forcing all of us to live inside that lie. Daniel placed the microphone down. He removed his ring, left it on the wedding cake table, and walked out of the hall. For the first time, my mother stood in a crowded room and could no longer control anyone. I left the reception hall before Vanessa could rise from the stone floor. Not because I did not feel pain. I did. But there is a strange kind of pain that comes when you watch someone who was once placed on a throne collapse and realize you do not feel happy. I only felt tired. tired of all the years we had been forced to perform in my mother's play. Nora was waiting for me in the parking lot. She did not ask anything. She simply opened the car door and stood there as if she would catch me if I fell. But just as I stepped past the last row of lights from the garden, my father called from behind me. "Clara, wait for me." I stopped, but I did not turn around right away. The music inside the hall had gone silent. All that remained were Whisper's shoes grinding against gravel and my father's breath as he hurried toward me. "You don't have to explain," I said. "No," he replied, his voice hoarse. "I want to take responsibility." I turned around. Thomas Whitmore stood in front of me, his tie crooked, his eyes red, his shoulders sagging, as if he had aged 10 years in one evening. I used to think that if my father ever cried because of me, I would feel relieved. But my heart was only quiet like a room that had been empty for too long. "I knew your mother treated you unfairly," he said. I always knew. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was new, but because it had finally been spoken out loud. "Then why didn't you do anything?" He looked down at his shoes, now covered with gravel dust. "Because I was a coward. Because I was afraid to confront her. Because I told myself that keeping the house peaceful was best." I gave a very soft laugh. "Nudaj. It was best for you." He closed his eyes as if those words had touched the exact place where he had hidden his guilt for 9 years. "Yes," he said. "I chose my own peace instead of protecting you." There was no screaming, no grand embrace, only the truth standing between us, much too late. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I can't forgive you tonight. Maybe not for a very long time." He nodded. Tears fell, but this time he did not use them to make me soften. "I understand." "No," I replied. "You have only heard me. Understanding is what you have to do after tonight." I walked toward the car. Behind me, he did not call again. That was the first decent thing he did that night. 3 days later, my phone was full of messages. Aunt Helen apologized. One cousin said he had never known the truth. An older relative sent an email saying my grandmother would have been proud of me. I read all of them, but I did not answer right away. This time I was not in a hurry to become pleasant, just so other people could feel less ashamed. The contract with Lakeview continued. Daniel sent a short email saying Vanessa's personal situation would not affect the agreement with Carebridge. I respected that. Vanessa was suspended from work, then dismissed for falsifying her degree. My mother posted a long statement online saying her family had been torn apart by jealousy. But for the first time, no one applauded her. People asked about me. They asked about Vanessa. They asked about the truth. The post disappeared after a few hours. A week later, I sent my mother an email. "If you want to be present in my life, start with the truth. If not, I will keep living peacefully outside your story." She did not reply. And this time, her silence no longer controlled me. Months after the wedding, someone asked me if I felt satisfied. I stayed silent for quite a while because the real answer was not what they expected. No. I did not feel satisfied. Satisfaction would mean I needed Vanessa to fall in order to prove that I was still standing. I did not need that. I had been standing long before everyone in that room learned my name. I stood in that freezing dorm room where I had to sleep in my coat. I stood in the restaurant kitchen when 3 burned fingers still had to keep washing dishes. I stood through the nights when my mother called me a difficult daughter simply because I refused to disappear the way she wanted me to. Carebridge continued to grow. The Boston office was lit from early morning. Every day when I watched young employees walk in with coffee cups in their hands and unfinished ideas in their minds, I remembered the first 12 pages I had written in that employee break room. Some things begin very small, so small that no one in your family even bothers to look at them. But if you hold on to them long enough, if you feed them with discipline and tears, One day they become the place where you belong. My father called me every Sunday afternoon. The calls were short. He talked about the weather, the neighbor's dog, and the documentary he had just watched. He no longer said, "Give it more time." He was learning how to be a father through small, late, awkward actions. I had not fully forgiven him, but I had not closed the door. Vanessa sent me a handwritten letter. In it she wrote, "I lived for so long as the version Mom wanted that I forgot I had never become a real person." I read the letter, folded it, and placed it in a drawer. I had not answered yet. Some apologies need to be set down before they can be picked up. As for my mother, she never replied. In the past, her silence was a sentence. Now it was only the choice of someone who no longer had the power to write my story. If this story reminds you of a wound inside your own family, comment freedom. And if you believe that the person who was once overlooked can one day step into the light, subscribe to the channel so you will not miss the next stories. I am Clara Whitmore. I am not the leftover child, not the girl who was left behind, not the name my mother used as a background for Vanessa. I am the one who survived. And in the end, I no longer needed them to recognize me.